Let's continue solving quadratics by factoring. On number 11, we're going to again start off by making sure everything is on the same side and set equal to 0. I'm going to move the 7r squared over to the other side, which will make it a negative 7r squared. You don't have to put it right underneath the common term, but I like to if it's available. Now I'm going to combine like terms. These are the same kind of numbers, so 8r squared minus 7r squared is r squared. There's only one r term, one constant, and it's equal to 0. A really nice type 1. I'll write down the two factors we're going to build. Then I'll go ahead and write down the factors of 2. Luckily, 2 only factors one way, so I know that that's them. But how do I get them to add up to a positive 3r? Make them both positive. Now I'm ready. Factors of r squared go in the first position, r and r. Factors of 2 that add up to be 3r are positive 1 and positive 2. Now, since we're solving, I'm going to set each one of those factors equal to 0. When I move the 1 over to the other side, it'll make that r a negative 1. When I move the 2 over to the other side, that's going to make the r a negative 2. Here's the next one. I'm going to start again by making sure everything is on the same side and set equal to 0 in descending order. So I'm going to move the 65n over to the other side. The 10n squared will go first. The 65n should be next, but when I move him over, he does become a negative 65n. Minus 35 equals 0. Now I notice all of the numbers end in 0 and 5, so definitely there's a greatest common factor of 5 that I can take out ahead of time. That is going to be factored out of every term, so when I factor the 5 out of the the first term, it's going to leave behind a 2n squared. When you factor 5 out of a negative 65n, I'm left with negative 13n. And when I factor the 5 out of the negative 35, I'm left with a negative 7. This is a type 2 factoring, so I'm going to need to multiply my lead coefficient and my constant together. It's going to give me a negative 14, which will give me factors of 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. I'm trying to make a negative 13 out of that, so I will be using the 1 and 14. In order to get them to add up to negative 13, the 1 will be positive and the 14 will be negative. And you see how they do multiply out to be negative 14. With a type 2 quadratic, we are going to have to use grouping. So I'm going to bring the first term down, and I'm going to rewrite the negative 13n using those two numbers, plus 1n minus 14n, and then bring down the constant. When you're doing this method, you're going to factor by grouping. So I group the first two terms together. I group the second two terms together. The first two pieces have an n in common. So when I factor it out, I'm left with a 2n plus 1. Bring down the sign between the two terms in the second group. 14n and 7 both have a 7 in common. When I factor the negative 7 out of 14n, I'm left with a 2n. When I factor the negative 7 out of negative 7, I'm left with a positive 1. Now I notice I'm down to two pieces. Those two pieces have a 2n plus 1 in common. So I open my leftover parentheses. When I factor the 2n plus 1 out of the first term, I'm left with an n. When I factor the 2n plus 1 out of the second term, I'm left with a negative 7. Don't forget that 5 you took out ahead of time needs to come down. Now I'm going to go ahead and set each factor equal to 0. And I'm going to solve. For time's sake, well, this one is a lie. 5 equals 0 is a lie. For time's sake, and I don't have a lot of room, you would solve it like we've done on the previous examples. Your answer will be negative 1/2. And the n minus 7 will solve and get you an n equals 7. Let's look at number 15. And again, I'm going kind of fast trying to get this finished, but you can always slow me down by pausing and getting, working ahead yourself. Now on this one, excuse me, 16n squared minus 114n, and the negative 14 is on the wrong side. I need to move him back over to the left-hand side. When I do, I get a positive 14. So I only have one n squared term. I'm going to write him down first. Then I've got this 114n. That's going to go second. And then I have this positive 14. He will go last. Now he's ready to factor. 16, 114, and 14 all are even numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and factor out at least a 2. 2 factored out of 16n squared is 8n squared. 2 factored out of 114, and again, if you have a hard time doing that, use it like division. It's going to give us a minus 57n. And when you factor 2 out of 14, you're going to get a positive 7. That is definitely a type 2. I'm going to multiply my lead coefficient and constant together. That's 56. The factors of 56 that I'm going to use to get myself a middle term of negative 57. 1 and 56, and I could keep going, 2 and 28, and so forth. But after a while, you start getting to where you recognize them immediately. If I'm trying to make a 57, 1 and 56 are going to work. I'm going to make them both negative so that they add up to a negative 57n. Now let's build it so we can do our factoring by grouping. 8n squared, the middle term I'm going to rewrite using these two numbers I just found, minus 1n minus 56n plus 7 equals 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and group it because that's what we built it for. The first two terms in the first group have an n in common. I'll factor it out, which leaves behind an 8n minus 1. Bring down the sign between the two groups. 56n plus 7 both have a negative 7 in common. When you factor it out, you are left with an 8n minus 1. Now we're down to two terms. These two terms have an 8n minus 1 in common. When I factor it out of the first piece, I'm left with an n. When I factor it out of the second piece, I'm left with a negative 7. And don't forget to bring down that 2. I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. That one's going to mean nothing, so I'm going to get rid of him. 8n minus 1 will equal 0. I don't have room, but you would solve it like we did in the previous examples, and you're going to get 1/8. Then you set n minus 7 equals 0, and that will solve out to 7, and I'll let you do that on your own. Let's see. We have one more, so I think we're going to do it. All right. Let's go ahead and start by making sure everything's on the same side and in descending order. The 7 needs to be brought over, and the negative 4a needs to be brought over. I'm going to put the a squareds down first, 7a squared. I do have an a term plus 40a, and then I have 32 minus 7, which is 27, equals 0. I don't see anything that we can, oh, that's a 39, isn't it? Sorry, guys. Check that out. I added wrong. That's going to give us, okay, no, I just said that wrong again. 32 minus 7 is 25. Oh my gosh, I did. Okay, let me fix that. And let's finish. All right, well, I know that 7 times 25, I don't know, so I'm going to do it on my calculator. 175. Because since it is a type 2 trinomial, we have to do the factoring by grouping technique that we learned for these. 175, sorry, my finger. 175 factors a couple of different ways. Let me show you something kind of neat. 7 and 25. 7 has factors of 7. 25 has factors of 5 and 5. I need them to add up to 40. So if I group these two numbers together, I can say 5 times 35 instead of building all of the factors. So I'm going to go ahead and use those. I need them to add up to a positive 40, which I'll make both of them positive. We're going to get 7a squared. I'm going to rewrite the 40a using those numbers. And again, you can take a little bit longer and write down all of the factors and you'll find them. I'm just trying to make the video fit under the timeline I need. I rewrote the middle term using those two factors that I found that equal 40a when I add them together. Now I'm going to group the first two together and I'm going to group the second two together. The first two pieces have an a in common, which I can factor out, and it'll leave us 7a plus 5. Bring down the sign. 35a and negative 25 have a 5 in common. When I factor it out, oh, that should be a positive. I just keep making mistakes. Fix that, please. That would have been a positive 25, which will make it a positive 25 there. 7a plus 5. That is just a mess. I apologize. When I added 32 and negative 7, I got a positive 25. So change that sign there and that sign there. Now we're caught up. When I factored the 5 out of the second group, I am left with a 7a plus 5. Now I'm down to two terms. Those two terms have a 7a plus 5 in common. When I factor it out of the first piece, it leaves behind an a. When I factor it out of the second piece, I'm left with a 5. Now I can set those two pieces equal to 0, which means this one will solve into a negative 5/7. I'll let you finish that on your own. And this will solve out to be a negative 5. On the homework, you don't have to do numbers 19 and 20, so we're not going to address them here. I'll see you in the next section.